Okay, this is probably going to be a little bit weird to hear, but welcome to the first of my Genshin Impact theories. This is probably the one that at least I believe in the most, rather than there's a few other ones that I've thought of that they make sense, but this one's definitely has the most backing it in terms of actuality, even though it's probably technically not canon in the game, which is fine. But I think my theory has some merit to it. But before we start, make sure to leave a like and a sub wherever you're watching this from. Really helps me out, helps the channel grow, and we're almost at 100 subscribers on my YouTube, and that's when I promise to debut my new model. She's all ready to go, so all we have to do is get there, and I will make a personal lore video on it as well. And so just hope we can get there. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be amazing. So yeah, let's just get started. Okay, so my tiny conspiracy theory, not even conspiracy theory, headcanon theory is, what if Venti wasn't the true god of Anemo? Now, before you click away, hear me out. Like, we already know that he wasn't old enough to be in the Archon War. Or barely, actually. We know that he was a elemental being that floated on the wind wherever he went. But how did he get to rule Mondstadt, and how did Mondstadt get to become Mondstadt before he actually Archon? Which you might say, oh, it was the god of the storms or whoever ruled old Mondstadt to begin with, which I see. But I don't think that would have been actually this is probably a bit better too, a bit better with the story, and rather than it just being, oh, there's just aristocrats that started ruling Mondstadt, and Venti and his friend were mad about it and didn't want that to happen. But how did Mondstadt get its actual ideology? And that's where my theory comes in. What if that nameless bard that Venti talked about in the main quest was the actual god of Anemo? Like I said, hear me out. An actual god wouldn't have just, like, probably, I know what you're thinking, it wouldn't have just probably died, which makes sense. But what if, in the uprising in Old Mondstadt, where Storm Terror's lair is on the actual map, what if during that uprising, the god that supposedly fought in the Archon War to establish Mondstadt and the Anemo was killed during that and gave their gnosis to Venti, and he became the replacement Archon for this god? Now, you're probably wondering, if it was just a god, like, who possibly could this have been? Because other than in the Archon quest and in the story quest, they're just mentioned as a nameless bard. There's never actually given really a name other than just nameless bard. So I was thinking, why don't we take what Venti has on his outfit? What if that's like the style of which what the actual god of Anemo would have worn, like a bard's outfit? Because we know that since Venti was an elemental being, he took the form of the nameless bard, and we can probably assume that he also would have idolized their way of dressing, which we can automatically assume would have been corsets and capes and tights and boots, which would also explain why he looks so much like a girl, and why people still, even after the game's been out for like 5 years, still mistake him for a girl? What if not instead of being just like a nameless bard, what if this god was actually a girl? Thinking, hey, Venti still looks a lot like a boy. What if he didn't? What if he is a boy, but since he would have idolized this bard, and hence the god of Anemo, what if she was actually a girl? Hence why he looks so much like a girl, with the braids and the corset and his way of speech, because he wouldn't have had that as an elemental being. So he even said he took the form of his best friend, which was the nameless bard, so to speak. But this is where it all ties together. What if the nameless bard was a girl, and she was the true god of Anemo that fought in the Archon War? Like, think about like at the beginning, because Venti wasn't born at the time when the Archon War started, because it was pretty much everyone, but I think Venti and I think Jablanc. I'm pretty sure. But who would have fought in the Archon War for Mondstadt besides Venti before he was born? That's where my theory comes in. Now we're going to talk about her identity. We already pretty much know what she would have looked like with the short-ish hair and the two braids and the style of being small and being very childlike, which would explain if she wasn't that old in terms of god age, because we know Zhongli is over 6,000 years old, and he just looks like an adult man. So I think we can rightly assume if she was, let's say, or maybe around 2,000 years old, that would make a lot of sense why she still looks like a kid. Or like a 15-year-old, let's say. And what if that all of the style that Venti uses in his kit and his story and his personality came from her? And think about it. Again, bear with me. If that flower that Venti wears in his outfit beside his hat, the most rare flower in Mondstadt that only grows on one cliff out of the entire nation, the entire world of Teyvat, think about it. What if her name was Cecilia? That after she was killed during the uprising of Old Mondstadt, what if, as a tribute to her, he started calling the flower after her and started wearing them in his hair? Again, sounds a little far-fetched, I can see. But what if that were to actually happen? But you're probably also now thinking, well, we know she died in the uprising of Mondstadt, supposedly. But how do you kill a god? Which is a valid question. We know from just lore in general that gods can only be killed by godly weapons. So what if during this uprising that she was killed by the god of storms that was supposedly ruling over Mondstadt at this time? That, let's say, my personal headcanon is that during this battle, they would have all been fighting. Just picture it for a second. They're all fighting. Mondstadt's losing against the aristocracy, and that I would think that this would probably be her personality because it matches up pretty well with Venti's. What if that there were unprotected little kids, and he knew that she would try to protect them, let's say, and as she went to protect them, was hit by a godly weapon. You can picture what it was, whether it was like an arrow, a spear, or whatever. And before she officially passed, that Venti was with her, still as an elemental being. That what if she what if that he took her form after she died, and also she gave Venti her gnosis, so he could have her power and save Mondstadt. Again, that's just my personal headcanon, but think about it. Like, really think about it. I think, especially within, like, the traveler's journey, wind comes into play more often than you might think. I know obviously in Mondstadt, we use it to defeat Storm Terror. I think in Liyue, when we're fighting that giant Hydra thing, I think there's also wind that comes into play there. In Azuma, I know after you set off those fireworks at the statue after the Vision Hunt decree, I know that you also glide on wind to get out of there. And skipping ahead a bit in lore in the story, in Natlan, in the land of nightmares, or what it's called, I don't specifically remember, that to get out, Seelie, which are supposedly from the god of Anemo herself, or they think Venti, I think otherwise, that the Seelie summons the wind, which helps them escape, then followed by Mavika, and she, literally breaking down the sky. But, like, wind comes into play a whole lot more on our journey as the traveler than you might expect. And what if we already think the Seelies are a form of the god of Anemo already? So what if those are her? That she sees traveler on their journey and, decides to help them as spirits. Whether it's Seelies or being just random wind currents throughout to that it's her helping out the traveler. Again, sounds a little far-fetched, but if you really think about it, it does sort of make sense. That since Venti technically wouldn't have been old enough to fight in the Archon War for Mondstadt, at least, that there was another one who actually fought, and, let's be real, besides probably Morax in the actual Genshin lore, was probably one of the strongest gods to exist. And again, my personal headcanon was that, again, picture this, my personal headcanon was Cecilia, the goddess of Anemo, would have been fighting against Morax's troops, like at the border of like Dragonspine in Liyue, like those little islands. And since they're both by canon lore very strong, what if that she actually bested him and they worked together to to free Tefat from the heavenly principles and stuff, and to give them their own countries with their own ideologies and their own culture and their own ways of life. I mean, again, take all of this with a grain of salt, but it does sort of make sense. And lastly, we go back to Venti and Mondstadt with his whole taking a form of the nameless bard that we have so named throughout this video. That he rules how she would have ruled. After defeating the aristocracy in Old Mondstadt, all the townspeople moved to where the city of Mondstadt is now, And by what Cecilia would have done, what if Venti instructed these people, led these people to build, they built Mondstadt like a fortress. It's completely surrounded by water. The there's one way in, one way out. It's almost completely self-sustainable from within those walls, except for the farms on the outside of the city. It's almost completely self-sustainable. It has its own form of government. It has wind-powered electricity. So besides what the people do around Springvale, they're almost self-sustainable. There's one way in, one way out. You can't attack the walls because it's completely surrounded by water. And I mean, I haven't played the most recent Archon Quest update yet in Mondstadt. I really should. I really should stream that. But going off of, I haven't played that yet, and I've only seen like little snippets of the story. I think that's what I think. And that Venti has his morals of he doesn't want to be an aristocratic leader, so he leads by not leading, actually. And he basically is just, he supervises, basically. Everyone always calls him that. He's not a super invested god, he's the weakest and all of that. But what if that's not how our nameless bard, Cecilia, our goddess of Anemo herself, would have ruled? And since that's how she died, was at the hands of an aristocrat, what if he didn't want to have that happen again? So he physically withdrew himself and gave the people of Mondstadt their own lives and their own freedom. Hence why Mondstadt is the city of freedom. I rest my case, and that's the end of my headcanon, at least this one. So thank you for watching and listening to me rant for almost 20 minutes about pretty much one of my most favorite games ever. And there are definitely some more theories where that came from. And tell me yours too, and maybe I'll make a video or make some sense out of it too. But like I said, thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button. Almost at 100 subscribers. I will be debuting my new model and my lore video when that happens. And just go out there and think up your own stories, even as weird or crazy as this one. But go think them up and write them down too, because we don't want stories, even if they're super wild or super far-fetched, to go to waste, because every little story that comes up it's a story, and it's someone's thoughts put onto paper, or even if they didn't put it onto paper, it's there. And stories are so great that it gets people thinking, as all good art should. It gets people thinking. So write some down, tell them to friends, tell them to your family, tell them to your goldfish. Whoever is willing to listen. Listen to a story. Go out and, I don't know, search on the internet a story that you know nothing about, even if it's like a video game theory or something like that. If it's a story, a book, a headcanon, a video game rant, a video essay, go listen to it. Go listen to what they have to say. And I'm sure you'll all tell me if I'm right or wrong, or if this is plausible in the comments. So rip me a new one if I'm just totally wrong. But I may or may not actually listen, because this is my little story. And take it with a grain of salt, as the rest of these that I'm going to make into a series. So, yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.